I'm Toby Jones, Associate Producer on GRiD2, and you're watching Platform32.
GRiD2 was one of the best games I played at this year's Eurogamer, not just because the game ruled, but because of this beast, a Visaro motion platform. This full setup, including the 3 monitors, would cost you about £15,000, but by using D-Box tech and 4 pneumatic actuator thingies, it gives the closest experience to driving a real high-powered sports car as is virtually possible, thanks to the really detailed car physics and handling that Codemasters have shoved under the hood of GRiD2. I jumped into the hot seat and tried to smash the fastest lap as I wowed the crowds with my incredible driving skills. Okay, I lied. I was crap and people laughed at me, but it was still great fun anyway, and the way the motion platform worked with the game was incredible. I could literally feel the tyres spinning beneath me, struggling to grip the surface of the road as I put the pedal to the metal at the start of the race. Well worth the 15k if you've got it lying around, and a spare room to put it all in. After I'd finished making a tit out of myself, I spoke to Toby Jones, Associate Producer on the game, and asked him how GRiD2 has improved on GRiD.
The original GRiD obviously came out 4 years ago, 2008. Originally, sort of sales were slow originally, but then massively picked up as review scores sort of went out, reviewed really strongly, ended up winning a BAFTA award, massive quality in the title, and that soon shone through. Got a huge following sort of in the day, and since then people have been waiting for the follow-up. So as a dev team, it's been tricky sort of holding back and not getting straight on there with the follow-up. But one thing we didn't want to do was follow up too soon with something that sort of wasn't worthy for such a great title. So over the last 4 years, the technology has been developing. We've been working on the Dirt franchise, the F1 franchise, making all the tech developments that go with producing those games, feeding all of that back into the Ego engine, and we're now in a position where we think we can do the follow-up justice. Most of the improvements have been made, as I say, through the Dirt franchise and F1 franchise. So the Dirt franchise has very much been looking at sort of suspension improvements. It's been an off-road title, so sort of loose surface. So as everything travels up through the suspension to the chassis of the car, looking at that kind of tech. Also the sampling rate on the track surface. When you're looking at a bumpy off-road surface, you need to be sampling the track surface a lot faster to get that detail in there. It's not a flat tarmac road. Whereas the F1 franchise has been looking at sort of aerodynamic tech. Also tyre tech, so the actual connection between the tyre and the tarmac, and sort of tyre temperatures, getting all of that, and tyre wear and tyre movement, improving all of that side of things. And obviously on both titles you've got all the graphics improvements that go with that as well. So yeah, all of those feed into the Ego engine and back into GRiD2.
So GRiD2 really is an amalgamation of all the best bits of Cody's other famous franchises. Great news for hardcore fans who really want an authentic feel to their rides. Now Toby, could you tell us about Live Routes? This is a brand new addition to the GRiD franchise that you've just announced at Eurogamer.
Essentially, it's we've been looking at how we can get more from our tracks and sort of innovate, do something new that somebody hasn't necessarily done before. We found that in the city circuits, we have a lot of cities in GRiD2. It's one of our race types. So for example in Chicago, it's very much based on a grid system. And our level design team are putting a lot of effort into researching those tracks, those roads. We're getting as much variation as we could through the track. We found that actually we're reusing sections of track. So say if we did 5 individual routes through Chicago, first sort of 3 of them would be reusing a section of track. And then we started to think, why should we limit ourselves to just 5 routes through Chicago when there's so many intersections that we've already modelled, they all naturally join up. How could we get more variety here for the player and sort of keep their attention longer, longevity and all that side of things. So we actually thought we could push the tech to connect all of the intersections in a random manner. It sort of started off as an experiment. We thought, if every intersection you got to, it's sort of randomised which way it went, if it went left or right or straight ahead, and we kept playing like that. How long would it take before it started to get stale and before we realised that we were going through the same sections of track again? So we connected it up with sort of a random method, played it in the studio. We found that it was sort of getting to 25 minutes and it still wasn't clicking in our heads that we were going over the same sections of the track, because each corner was slightly different. You might go through a left and a right and then you'd be expecting a straight on, but then you get hit with another left and you think, oh no, actually that isn't the bit I thought it was. And it took us a long time to actually think that the tracks, we're racing over the same section of the track. So then we've sort of taken that to the next level now, sort of progressed that and turned it into the live route system.
Sounds like that will extend the life of the gameplay dramatically. Nice, and you can choose to have live routes on or off, right?
You can choose whether you want to have it on or off, single player and multiplayer sessions. So if you prefer sort of a fixed route that you can learn every apex, learn the entry and exit speeds of every corner, if that turns you on, then you can do that. If you want the variety in there for a bit more randomness, then yeah, you can whack on live routes.
Another new feature that was announced a few months back was True Feel. What's that then?
True Feel is the phrase that we coined to sort of describe the approach we want to take for the handling in GRiD. One of the things that we wanted to do for GRiD 2 is quite a bold move, but we decided to do it early on, was to implement a handling model that we could run without any assists. So you'll still have automatic and manual gears in the game, but there won't be any steering assists, there won't be any throttle or braking assists. The main reason for that is that we feel that assists, although they're helpful for the player, and we've done a lot of good work with them in the past, ultimately they get in the way of truly understanding how a car handles. So if you've got, say, a sort of high-powered rear-wheel drive car that tends to oversteer, if you've got too many assists on, you just won't learn that that's the characteristic of that car. You won't learn to deal with it. You won't learn how to counter steer and to catch it through the bend. And we really want to portray that to the player. We've got such a wide variety of cars in GRiD 2, some of the best cars in the world, some of the most iconic vehicles, that it's really important for us that the player understands what it's actually like to drive those cars. So yeah, we took the decision to turn off all assists, and what that meant is that we're running a raw handling model. And we needed to tailor that to make it accessible, as well as have depth for the more experienced players. So essentially what we do is we set the vehicles up in a very sort of strict simulation manner, where we work really closely with the vehicle manufacturers, get all of the real specifications in, model them in-game in sort of our simulation, get them handling exactly how they would in real life. Our handling guys have had first-hand experience with a lot of cars, and where we don't get to drive some of the cars, we get experienced drivers in from the world of motorsport, and they sort of confirm that the cars handle correctly how they'd expect it to handle on track. And once we're at that stage, we then look at any sort of blocking characteristics that an average player might find a bit tricky. So if there's excessive understeer in there, so they'll be sort of continually running wide, we'll then look at maybe scaling that back a bit by just sort of changing the weight shift, the centre of gravity of the car a little bit perhaps, just to make it a little bit more accessible. So the end result is a car that handles in an accessible manner. So it's not impossible to get around the track, but the key characteristics of the car are still there, the core characteristics. So it will still understeer, it will still oversteer, or exactly as you'd expect it to in real life.
Obviously, a racing game is nothing without some tasty tracks to tear around. What kind of locations will be featuring in GRiD 2? We've
got track content in GRiD 2 spanning sort of 3 continents. We've got content in there from Europe, content from America, content from Asia. We've also tried to get a real breadth in all of those areas. So the sort of 3 main types of track that we're looking at is city locations. So very much sort of in America, for example, you'd have very much a grid kind of set up with lots of 90-degree turns. We've got road racing, which typically takes place in more remote locations. So locations such as the California coast or Côte d'Azur. It's more about being up against nature, so you've got longer sweeping roads, a bit more of a challenge there. And then we've got circuit locations, so licensed motorsport circuits.
What about the most important thing, the cars? What vehicles am I likely to be crashing into walls when this game is released?
So far we've sort of announced a sort of taster of the cars that we've got in GRiD 2. Essentially all of the cars in the game are split into 4 tiers. 1 to 4 obviously, and the 1 being the most basic tier, 4 being the most advanced tier. The tier 1, although it's basic, it's sort of, you won't find low-powered hatchbacks in there. We're dropping the player straight in there with sort of American muscle cars, looking at sort of 200 brake horsepower, rear-wheel drive. So they're going to be still good fun to play, but essentially they're going to be slightly more accessible. But then as you work up through the tiers, you'll get a real variety of cars in there. You have lightweights such as the BAC Mono. You have cars from the sort of the Japanese market, such as the Nissan R34 Skyline, with the Atessa 4-wheel drive system that has, so it handles very differently. And as you progress sort of through towards the end of the game to Tier 4, you'll have the real hypercars in there where money's no object. It's just about what can be achieved from a car. So you have things like the Pagani Huayra with its active aerodynamic system, or the Koenigsegg Agera R, which is faster than the Bugatti Veyron Supersport. It's a ridiculously powerful car developed by the Swedes. So yeah, real range. And what we find that by having a tier system like that, we can also put cars up against each other that you wouldn't traditionally see competing against each other. So you might have a sort of a E36 BMW going up against an American sort of Ford Mustang muscle car, and one's obviously got a massive power advantage, whereas the other one sort of wins on weight. So although you wouldn't traditionally find them competing against each other, they could realistically give each other a run for their money. Typically you'll have things like the BAC Mono, a lightweight car, going up against sort of real muscle cars again. So you can sort of see some of those rivalries playing out.
Excellent. And talking about rivalries, what can you tell us about multiplayer in GRiD 2? Any new features there?
Multiplayer is something we've paid a lot of attention to in GRiD 2 as well. For the first time we're actually making it a completely separate experience to the single player experience, sort of taking a cue from a lot of first person shooters. So we really want to sort of tailor that experience to the multiplayer audience. And we're actually taking sort of a certain amount of content as well and putting that just in the multiplayer experience. There'll be things that you can unlock, sort of vehicles that you can gain access to only in multiplayer. You can't get that in single player. With regard to the actual multiplayer game modes, we'll be announcing sort of soon further detail on that stuff. But yeah, it's definitely watch this space for that.
Cheers, Toby. I loved my time with GRiD 2 at Eurogamer. It was great fun to play, even for a rubbish racer like me, and the gritty filmic visuals really give it a stylish look. As Codemasters continue to prove themselves to be the dons of the racing genre, GRiD 2 is a great showcase of all the best elements of their past endeavours in one amazing ego engine shaped package, and it's definitely a game that race fans should be revving their engines in anticipation for. Now, can anyone out there lend me 15 grand? I have a feeling one of those Visaro motion platforms would look really nice in my living room, like really nice. Come on, I'll let you have first go on it once I set it all up if you do.